Welcome to the Alberta Prosperity Project Podcast. If you're ready to listen, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Thursday, September 15th, 2022. Welcome to episode 18 of the Alberta Prosperity Project Podcast. I'm your host, Hunter, today, joined today with Tanner, who is back in Lloyd and without a hat. Tanner, how are you?
It's true, I'm back in Lloyd. I'm without a hat, though I need a haircut, and I am doing just phenomenal. We had a fun vacation, and I think I consumed more peaches during that week than anyone has consumed maybe in the whole history of ever. Would you, I guess you weren't there, but I consumed a lot of peaches.
There you go.
Yeah, a lot of peaches. And the apples were also phenomenal. It was apple season. We had galas, etc. Man, they were just fantastic. I even brought some back for you. Have you had a couple?
You betcha. I've never seen a peach that size before, but the ones that he brought back for listeners that are watching the video, it was honestly like this. I think it was genetically modified or something. I don't care. It tasted great.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean,
no,
whatever they were spraying on it.
They were dummy big. They were dummy big peaches. Yep.
They were.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the farmers in BC that are doing that right now, keep it up. I mean, it was they were sweet and they were ripe just at the right time. So I cannot complain.
No, they were good peaches. What's your absolute favorite fruit? Not just from BC, but anywhere.
Yeah. You know what? I do like peaches a lot. I do like mangoes also quite a bit. I'm more of the more exotic stuff and that kind of thing. Pineapples are good. Anything that reminds me of being on a beach as opposed to the minus 55 degree weather that we get in Alberta, I am okay and willing to support. Obviously, as you know, though, fruit is quite expensive here. I know that you guys had mentioned the price over there was a lot different in that, so that was nice to see. So I definitely appreciate you bringing some back. But obviously a lot of changes have happened in the last week since our previous podcast, and since you've been in BC, obviously the listeners I'm sure all know by now that Queen Elizabeth II, one of the longest reigning monarchs, has passed away, and her successor now, King Charles III, is going to be kind of the theme of our podcast today. So not so much on the Queen herself, but on King Charles and what he kind of believes and what he's looking to do now that he is on the throne. And so with that, do you maybe want to touch just on a quick few sentences of what King Charles III is maybe going to look like when he is now the king?
Sure. That's a good question. Based on what King Charles III has said, even though he's the King of England, he's acting more like a conditioner. It seems like he wants to transform society into, my opinion, what is a contemptible image. He wants to completely remake not just England, not just the Commonwealth, but based on his quotes, the entire world, in order to reflect actually the vision that Klaus Schwab and other followers like that have for the world. And so, quite frankly, it's diametrically opposed to what the APP is proposing for Alberta. The quotes and the sayings and the ideas and the ideals of the now King Charles are precisely opposite to what APP is proposing.
Yeah,
and what I
absolutely.
Believe, and what I believe you believe too. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's a nice way to frame it. Obviously, we are going to get into some of those quotes here as we get into the episode. But one of the main things, and obviously in previous podcasts, we've touched on this before, but that is this idea of climate change. And King Charles clearly already in previous speeches and current ones as well has been an outspoken activist for intense climate change action. One quote that I'll give and then maybe get some of your feedback and thoughts on was a recent one here at the COP26 summit. Obviously, we talked a little bit about that previously as well. But he said, we have to put ourselves on what might be called a war-like footing. The scale and scope of the threat we face call for a global level systems solution based on radically transforming our current fossil fuel economy. He then goes on to say that we know this will take trillions, not billions of dollars. And we also know that countries that are burdened by growing levels of debt simply cannot afford to go green. Here we need a vast military-style campaign to marshal the strength of the global private sector, in essence, to help transform society. Obviously, a lot of big and scary words, especially coming from a royal such as the war and the military, the trillions of dollars that it's going to take. But maybe do you want to touch just a little bit on what this might mean in terms of climate change action from the king?
Sure. So when we structured this podcast, right, you and I decided on a theme called Exposing King Charles, right? That was kind of the topic of the podcast. And you're right to start with climate change, because climate change is the foundation for everything that King Charles is proposing. All of these new ideals to completely, radically transform the world, right? Our thesis is this. King Charles and many others, right, are worshiping nature, right? They worship the climate. They worship nature. The problem with this is that we tend to imitate what we worship. And so by worshiping nature, if you imitate it, it enables you in a sense to actually imitate its cruelties. You see, the worship, this is from Chesterton, the worship of the natural always leads to what's unnatural. Or no, it always leads to what's unnatural. It's just the way history has proven that it works. And so by worshiping the climate, by worshiping nature, you're able to imitate its cruelties in the name of kindness. So when you hear these individuals like King Charles talk about the climate and talk about nature, they make it sound like it's fluffy, like it's cute, it's cuddly, and it's to be hugged, right? They make the perfect state of nature sound like this garden where everything is living in harmony, there's total peace, etc., etc. But of course, that's just not true, right? When you hear these individuals, like at COP26, paint a picture for us about what nature is supposed to be or what it naturally looks like, they make it seem like it's this oasis where water abounds and nothing hurts anything and everything's at total peace and there's birds singing and the sun is always shining and it's a perfect 24 degrees, etc., etc. But all you have to do is look outside, whether you're in the country or the rainforest or a farm or what have you, and you realize that nature itself actually isn't kind. It's not benevolent, right? Look at the hurricanes, look at tornadoes, look at massive snowstorms for that matter. We live in Alberta, we live in Canada, we know what that looks like. Look at animals, look at the alpha of a pride who literally kills cubs that are not its own, right? Look at birds fighting over territory. They're ruthless, right? They're savage. They are uncompromising when it comes to fighting over nests or territory, what have you. So what we see is that nature actually isn't kind in its natural state. It's not benevolent. But if you frame it like it is, and if you worship it, then it enables you to imitate its cruelties. And so, there's these unkind things in the name of being kind. So our thesis is that by proposing these things in the name of climate change, by proposing these things, in the name of worshiping the climate, in the name of worshiping what's natural, it tends to lead to things that are unnatural. Now, you just read a quote, right? And it's a good quote. Yeah. It's not good what it says, but it's a full quote. There's a lot of body and a lot of information in it. And we can see some of these unnatural consequences that arise, right, from worshiping the climate. The first thing that I see is this warlike footing, right? This idea of enforcing climate change objectives on a warlike footing, right? You look at how these individuals are framing this combat between climate change and ourselves, right? To them, it is a war, right? In their minds, at least the way they present it publicly, we're fighting a war to save ourselves. Or no, not ourselves. Ourselves don't matter when you actually listen to them. The human is not worth anything. When you listen to what they say, it's the climate that's worth something. Nature. That's what the flag they're fighting for, right? Their flag is not the flag of the human, it's the flag of nature. And so by fighting for nature, you enable it to swallow up humanity, really is what I mean to say. But anyways, so they have this idea that we need to be on a warlike footing. That's what King Charles said. He's making it so that this whole climate change agenda is basically one big battle. And so the problem with this is that when you look at history and look at war, periods of war throughout history, you see that declarations of war, engagements of war, etc., enable the government to expand its power to sizes and scope that are otherwise impermissible. It enables them to expand their outreach and swallow up the population with all of these otherwise draconian powers in the name of winning the war. And of course, that's unnatural, right? It's unnatural for one man to have so much power over another. That's not right. Or one woman to have so much power over another. It doesn't matter who's in government. It's not natural to wield that much power in a single scepter, right? But this declaration of war, that we're at war with climate change, gives government that power. So that's the first unnatural consequence that we see. What's the next one? What are we talking about next?
You know what? I might just actually re-quote part of this, and then that'll help lead into the next part. And that is where he talks about radically transforming our current fossil fuel economy and how this will take trillions, not billions of dollars. And so I guess if it's taking trillions of dollars, it should be a good thing if we're going to spend that kind of money on it. But I'm not sure that we'd agree with the notion that eliminating our fossil fuel economy and transitioning to something renewable is actually going to help, the betterment of society. So what do you think about that?
Right. That's also quite correct. So, okay. It is natural to want to see humans flourishing, if that makes sense. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's natural to want to see society flourish. That's what's natural. Now, fossil fuels enables that. And a study of history makes that clear. Our own interactions with society today make that clear, right? Think of your life without fossil fuels. Think of my life without fossil fuels. Think of the audience's life without fossil fuels, especially in places like Canada, but really all over the world for that matter. You look at the difference in the quality of life between nations that have fossil fuels and don't, and it is clear and present that fossil fuels are absolutely necessary in order to create the most desirable situation for living or possible, right? It creates the highest standard of life possible. Think about going to a hospital for a surgery. Think about going to a hospital that runs on solar versus one that runs on oil and gas. And lo and behold, it hasn't, the sun has been, it's been cloudy for the last 3 days, right? Which hospital would you prefer to go to?
Yeah.
It's quite clear, right? I know and you know when we're on the operating bed that the lights won't burn out because the hospital is operated on oil and gas power, right? It might be that it's minus 40 and the wind is at 50 kilometers an hour outside and it's an absolute blizzard, right? The worst conditions possible. And yet I know that if I walk into my house, it's going to be warm because the natural gas heater is burning and it's, exhausting heat into the house, right? You look at all of these blessings in society that we're able to enjoy because of oil and gas. And so then to take it away, to declare, as King Charles has done, that we have to radically transform and transition away from a fossil fuel economy to one that's actually sustainable is, it's a ridiculous comment because they have to justify it in some capacity. You might as well say to a man, I'm going to take away your house in effort to live in a sustainable economy. That's nonsense, right? Total nonsense. Instead of, when you do that, you decrease people's quality of life, and you will decrease people's quality of life if you emancipate them from the evils of oil and gas, I guess heat and staying warm and being comfortable and being able to work on other things besides trying to stay alive as a bad thing, as some evil, right? If we think that that's desirable, then you have to seriously, what's the term? You have to seriously examine your own morals, right? And this is the problem, is that these men and women don't abide by morals, right? For them, it's about the climate. Remember, they're not concerned with law. They're not concerned with natural law. They're not concerned with human morality. They're concerned with saving the climate. Yeah. That's their reason for existence. So to decrease a human's quality of life in order to save the climate is totally unnatural. It's totally unnatural because we're humans. We're not creatures of, we're not a tree. We're not grass. We're not a lion, right? We're humans. And so it's something totally different to decrease our quality of life, which taking away oil and gas will do, is unnatural.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, tying that in with being unnatural and things that are of the unnatural sense. We've talked, obviously, again, on previous podcasts about this issue as well. But one other piece that I want to kind of touch on regarding King Charles is his sympathy and support for socialism and the way of the socialist. We've obviously talked about this previously and big government and that kind of thing. But I want to quote a couple more things from King Charles and get your thoughts on that take as well. Sure. But he mentions, to achieve the scale that we're looking for of mass socialism, if you want to call it that, we must not be afraid to reinvent our long-standing incentive structures, which have been having such perverse effects on our planetary environment and on nature herself, if we are to reap the benefits afforded by a more sustainable world. So obviously changing what incentives we provide to people in order to get them to work hard and to do and create the things that we've been so good at creating over the last hundreds of years. And he also talks about needing to rebalance investment into a more sustainable future. We need to accelerate our sustainable investment that will offer significant economic growth and employment opportunities, especially in the green energy and regeneration of nature and landscapes. So obviously a big focus again on that climate change piece, but also on moving away from capitalism and free markets and going towards a larger government structure. So I guess what is unnatural about that, if anything at all?
Right. Well, yeah, socialism is unnatural because it's anti-human. right? That is clear as clear. What's human is what's natural. Life is natural, and it's to be desired because it is natural. Socialism does not enable the flourishing of life. It's the opposite. History has proven it time and time again. Theory will also prove it. And so it's not natural. I find King Charles's quote that we have to move away from an incentive-based economy interesting, because what's his incentive for saying so? Like, the kicker is that you listen to that quote, and are we supposed to think that King Charles has no incentive even for his speech? Of course he does. It's just that his incentive, at least publicly, isn't profit, right? He says it's not profit, and so it has to be good because profit is so evil. Even though profit has, and capitalism has emancipated more people from poverty than any other economic system in the whole of history, right? In the whole of history. But nonetheless, you have to ask the question, well, then what is King Charles's motive? What is his, what was the word he used? Starts with an I. His incentive.
His incentive. Yes.
What's his incentive for all of these things that he's proposing? Well, it's to save the climate. So he's quite incorrect when he says that we have to move away from an incentive-based economy, because he himself has an incentive for saying that thing, right? It logically implodes. It logically crushes itself, right? To say that we don't need incentives is a quote that's based on incentives, right? His incentive is we have to save the economy. My incentive, or an individual's incentive in the free market, is an incentive to earn profit, which again is a signal that tells the whole society whether something is efficient or desirable or not. So what King Charles really should have said is that we have to change the incentives, right? We have to change the society's incentives in order to accurately reflect this objective of saving the climate, whatever that looks like. I don't know when we'll know when the climate will actually be saved. Do you?
Yeah. No, not at the moment. I guess when it's constantly minus 40 in the winter, and yeah. Well, actually, I don't even know an answer.
No one knows, right?
I don't think they do either.
No, the objectives are totally arbitrary. The objectives are totally based on weak words that enable them to consistently, we've heard this quote before, move the goalposts, right, from one location to another, so that they can perpetually tell us that we're in this crisis. We'll never be saved because, well, there is no crisis as far as I'm concerned. Like, this idea that we have to sacrifice the quality of human life in order to save the climate is nonsense, right? That is cruel, and that's wrong, and it's also unnatural. But back to socialism. So with socialism, right, you have, based on history, human suffering. There are shortages, there are inefficient allocations of resources, et cetera, et cetera. You know what's so funny is that when you actually look at the history of socialism, you see that the true socialist, is concerned with everything except for socialism, right? They, it's amazing how all they care about, all the socialist claims to care about is equality. Equality, 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 equality. And then when you look at history, you see that the only thing that they didn't achieve was equality. That was the last thing they cared about, was equality. That didn't matter one bit. Instead, they were trying to move something progressive this way, change something that way, more power here, more power there, and so on and so on. And the last thing that they were concerned about was equality. Churchill is right that if there is equality in socialism, it's the equal sharing of misery. That's quite correct, right? And so, again, that harkens back to it's unnatural to see it's unnatural to invoke human suffering. That's wrong. And it's unnatural because we ourselves are human. And socialism does invoke, it does create, it does conjure a storm of human suffering. Why does it do so? Because it's unable to efficiently allocate scarce resources in the economy for you and I to use to better our quality of life, right? There is so, it would be like you telling our audience members, however many there are, exactly what to wear. Right? It's like we don't have a clue. We wouldn't have a clue what style they like to wear, what size their clothes should be, what climate they live in, what they're doing for the day, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And yet the true socialist believes that one central oligarch, or two, in this case you and I, can tell all of these people, not just 1,000, not just 2,000 or 10,000, but 33 million people exactly what to wear, right? And they'll be comfortable. And then also what to eat, and where to live, and how much power to use, and what vehicle to drive, and all of these things, right? At its heart, socialism is unnatural because it disregards the ancient understanding and ownership of private property, right? At its heart, socialism disregards private property, and so it's unnatural, right? There is nothing more natural than private property, starting with yourself, right? From a secular perspective, I own me, right? I'm myself. I take responsibility for myself, right? I can protect myself because I am mine, right? Of course, the scripture and stuff has different things to say about that, but that's not the purpose of this podcast, right? From a secular perspective, I am my own. It is the most fundamental declaration of ownership of property, well, really in history. And then it branches out from that, right? So, but socialism says, no, you're not. You're governments, right? You're the states. And that is unnatural, totally unnatural. Yeah, totally unnatural. So those are just, the three things that we initially see, though I believe there are many more, I think, that prove to arise as a consequence of worshiping nature, of worshiping climate change, or worshiping the climate and fighting climate change, to be more accurate.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, this podcast being with Queen Elizabeth's death recently was why we kind of focused on King Charles and some of the things that he said. But there are politicians all over and people all over that believe these same things. And so we'd love to hear from our listeners either in the comments below, or you can shoot us an email on what you think about some of these quotes from King Charles III and just what you think about this idea of unnatural law. We're seeing it over and over. But if you want to help fight this unnatural law, we encourage you to come to our website, check us out, and join the cause. We are at Alberta Prosperity Project on social media, or you can go to www.albertaprosperityproject.com. It's there that you can see all about the team, our mission, our values, and our statements in which we can all come together and hopefully defeat this tyranny that is clearly on the rise right now. So with that said, it was great talking with you, Tanner. Be sure to subscribe to YouTube or Facebook or the podcast players so you never miss a future episode. We will see everybody, though, next week. Have a great rest of your day, Tanner.
See you later.